Hey everybody, Mark here. Thanks so much for tuning in to this special episode of the Menlo Moments podcast. This is pointing towards our Menlo 150 launch, where we're looking back and celebrating 150 years of history here at Menlo Church and hearing stories from congregants like Burt and Mimi McDowell. They've been attending the Menlo Park campus off and on since Mimi was a little girl and have an amazing story about following Jesus, both kind of falling away and then coming back to him. So it's an amazing story. They've been involved with a lot of things like the marriage mentoring, Brazil, if you've been to Hope Unlimited for Children, as well as just stories around how God can call people back in very unexpected ways. So enjoy this episode. It was so fun to record. And now we're going to hear a little bit more about Burt and Mimi.
Hi, I'm Mimi McDowell. This is my husband, Burt McDowell, and this is our Menlo moment. Well, I've been here the longest, so I'll start with where I grew up.
I can ask you
first. I grew up in Atherton.
Okay.
The way we got started at Menlo Press, I have a brother who's 10 years older than me.
Okay.
He's passed away, but because I was trying to get a few details for this, but he found Menlo Park Presbyterian Church. I'm not sure how. I called both of his kids to find out.
Oh, did you really?
And they couldn't tell me the story. But he had a group of friends, and he wanted them all to come with him over to this church. Oh. And they ended up having a fabulous youth group in high school here. So youth group experience.
Yeah. So your whole family was from Atherton, born and raised?
My whole family. No, I'm the only one that's a native Californian.
Really?
The rest of my mom and dad and sister and brother were all born in the Chicago area.
Okay.
So anyway, I don't know where anybody was attending. My parents were attending church. I know my father.
I think they were at a Baptist church.
My father was at a Baptist church.
Okay.
It was a Baptist. My mother, Episcopalian. But anyway, we ended up coming here. And I was probably, my memory goes back to about 6 years of age, which might have made my brother 16. So that's probably about right. And I don't have many vivid memories of it or memories that much, but I think there was the head of the children's ministries was either Miss or Mrs. Wilder, I think.
Okay.
But so I remember that, and I continued to attend here, as did my family. And then in junior high school, I went through a class that's a lot like the Seekers and Joiners class.
Interesting.
And made a confession of Christ.
Okay.
And I got sprinkled. There was no dunking back then.
Okay.
I got sprinkled, baptized. But unfortunately, at that stage of my life, I really only knew about Jesus. I discovered later that I really didn't have a relationship with him.
Okay. Interesting.
So that's how we got started there.
Okay. And so your whole family was attending together, and
you know what? I don't have that many memories of that. I think I peeled off and went to junior high and high school. I remember one thing, and I don't know whether it was Scott Farmer, one of our pastors years ago, or not, but we were on a ski trip. And I'd never been skiing before, but it was a great, either junior high or high school group. And it's so amazing because Phil was talking about the Lord's Prayer.
Oh, yeah.
And thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And our teacher taught us, thy kingdom come on earth in me. Thy will be done on earth in me.
Interesting.
To this day, I say that every time I say the Lord's Prayer.
Okay.
And I just thought how beautiful that is to have internalized that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. Wow. Mimi, thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Burt, where did you grow up? Were you also a California native?
No, I'm from Kansas City.
Okay.
Kansas City hayseed is what I call myself. And grew up there. And my mom and dad were believers. They came from a very
Legalistic.
conservative,
Yeah.
sort of almost fundamentalist background from the South.
Sure.
And they moved to Kansas City and chose, in reaction to that fundamentalist background, a church that was very liberal. And so I grew up attending that church and was very involved in the choir, junior deacon, and all that stuff. Was baptized at, I think, 12. I had no clue what the gospel was.
Yeah.
No idea.
Wow.
And but they were people of faith. We prayed at our every meal. They taught me the Lord's Prayer, and they would be on their knees with me at my bedside at nighttime. And I will never forget one time as a teenager when I was beginning to question,
Sure.
is this stuff is this real?
Uh-huh.
Walking down the hall upstairs, and I looked into my dad's bedroom, and he was on his knees by himself in his pajamas praying.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my gosh, he really believes this stuff.
Okay. Yeah. That must have been pretty influential on.
It hit me later when
Yeah.
I became a believer, because
Sure.
I was not a believer at that point. And when I went off to college.
Where'd you go to school?
Well, I went 2 years to Grinnell College in Iowa, and then transferred out here to Stanford,
Ah, okay.
and that's how I ended up in California.
Got
And and I became a card-carrying atheist as a biology major,
Sure.
and bought into evolution, and had the very depressing philosophy that a human, that I as a human had evolved to the point where I could realize that I was an evolutionary accident. And so life was completely and utterly meaningless other than whatever I put into it. And I like being my own God.
Yeah.
And so that was me from that age for another 20 years until I was 39.
Wow. Okay. So at what point did you two meet? Was it when you were attending Stanford?
We met right after I graduated from San Jose State as a nurse.
Okay.
And my first job was up at UCSF.
Okay.
His first clinical rotation as a medical student was in pediatrics.
Okay.
And so I worked the evening shift, and he went in to draw some blood on one of my patients, and I walked in, and he asked me out to coffee at 10 o'clock at night.
Classic
And,
doctor move.
Yeah, doctor's hours, So anyway, we ended up then going out, and
Okay.
it was a great relationship right from the beginning.
Yeah. So then at what point did you talk about your faith? And because I'm assuming you continued in your faith?
No, that's
No?
a story.
Okay.
I have a short story.
Love to hear about that.
I went off to the University of Colorado, and I went to church one time.
This was after San Jose State or before?
No, this is after high school.
After high school. Okay.
Yeah, after high school. It was known as a party school. My sister and brother-in-law were from there, so I just chose it. And became a sorority, entered a sorority, and it's just not really who I am. I was out of place. But the bottom line is that I decided I wanted to be the captain of my own ship.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go back to church. I didn't want any kind of authority that I had to have over me. So I ended up, and this is a mental picture of what I did. I took Jesus, the Jesus I knew of, or the Jesus that I might have had a romantic, sort of spiritual, Christmassy feelings towards.
Sure.
And I put them in an old-fashioned pressure cooker. And they were these metal things, and you screwed them shut. And I put Jesus in the pressure cooker on the back burner at cold. And I said, don't come out.
I know you're in there. We'll hang out later.
Yeah.
Don't bother me now.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I'm on my own.
Yeah.
And I want to be the captain. This is important. I want to be the captain of my own ship.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
is there something you want to?
Well, and our relationship was completely pagan from the get-go, and of course, my atheism, reinforced her, strain from what faith that she did have. But it is interesting that after dating for a year, we got engaged, and because Mimi had attended Menlo Pres,
And my family.
and her family, and her dad was very, very involved with the church. Carrie Wissiger, who was a pastor before Walt Gerber, married us, and he interviewed us, and he asked me about my faith. Mimi said, that she believed that Jesus was the Son of God.
Okay.
And he asked me that, and I said, nope, I'm an atheist. And but he went ahead and married us. But I found out later, after I became a believer, I had the opportunity to talk with him, and he was just ecstatic that I'd become a believer. And he said, I almost didn't marry you because it was unequally yoked. And he was so happy that I had come to faith.
Wow. That's really interesting, because I feel like both of you had an upbringing in faith, and then both of you kind of went away and did your own thing. So how did you get back here? Who came back first? Did you take him out of the pressure cooker first?
I love that you're asking this.
Yeah.
What happened was that, I said, I want to be the captain of my own ship.
Sure.
Well, we were heading into a shipwreck.
Okay.
Parenting was hard, very hard. We had a challenging child, and I did not have the mother gene. And so we ended up having a lot of struggles, especially when that child became a teenager. And we went through some counseling. Our child and each of us individually all went through counseling. And I was really down at the bottom of the barrel. Our child wasn't, getting to a place where things were going to be okay. We were really not making the progress we'd hoped we could make. And one day I was in my bedroom, and I was thinking, I was very depressed, and I was thinking, is this all there is to life, is going to counseling and find out what you've done wrong and hoping you do it right? And also, I've got all this guilt. Counseling doesn't do anything for that. And I had a beautiful encounter with Jesus. I call it my Damascus Road conversion.
Okay.
And in that conversion, he immediately became, by the Holy Spirit, I know now, became my sin bearer. So my guilt that I couldn't get rid of, he became the one who cared for me in my sin and my guilt. But I also said, but what about the rest of my life? And he said, as long as you have breath in your lungs, your life will have purpose and meaning, in essence. But I have to tell you a funny little aside.
Yes, I do.
And that is, this was a wonderful thought conversation with a very present Jesus. I don't want to make anybody think that they have missed out on a conversion experience because they haven't had this. But I was sort of having this thought conversation back and forth, and I said to the Lord, what about all the hypocrisy? Because believe it or not, at that time, I was from a wealthy town, right? Atherton, back then. And a lot of people came to church in their mink coats and white gloves. And I said, what about that? And what about all the hypocrisy? And Jesus clearly told me, never look to man to see who I am. You get into my word. And it just so happened that that day I was having lunch with my sister, who is in her 5th year of Bible study fellowship, which is a very wonderful, in-depth Bible study. So that after that, I'll let you describe how that was for you.
Yeah. Well, I also want to know, how did that feel when, like, was God on your mind before that? So it was just a thing that happened?
It's such a picture of grace,
Yes, it is.
Mark, because I was not searching for God.
Wow.
I was searching, through counseling and therapy and everything else. But I was not searching for God, and that's his pure, unmitigated grace.
Did you, how did it just feel like it was God? Like, how did you know in that moment that this was, because
I know.
I'm trying to put myself in that situation, and it's like, if I'm desperate for something and then I have this feeling in this encounter, was that just from like?
It was overwhelming.
Wow.
It was. I literally became alive.
Wow.
Ephesians says we were dead in our sins. Now Christ has made us alive.
Okay.
That's exactly what I felt like. You can use all sorts of terms for me. Born again.
Yeah.
But one thing I want Burt to tell you, because it really is a part of my story. So I changed almost overnight, and I started going to Bible study and never stopped. I'm still there in Bible study because Jesus said, never look to man to see who I am, get in my word.
Yeah.
And that has been the hunger of my life, is to be in the word, to teach it, to mentor with it, and all of that.
So then you talked to Burt, the card-carrying atheist, as you described yourself, and you just said, I had this encounter with God. And what was your reaction, Burt?
Well, what is interesting is that Mimi was not searching at all.
Right.
And during that 20 years of atheism, I had a hole in my soul. I knew that. And I had this love-hate relationship about Christians. I thought they were crazy, but I wanted to know about that. And there was a guy at the mental clinic where I worked who had all kinds of credentials, super smart guy. And I found out he was a Christian. I went in and I hardly knew him, but I said, I've heard, are you a Christian? And he said, yes. And I said, I can't believe anybody as intelligent as you can be a Christian. And he fortunately smiled. He didn't throw me out of the office.
Sure.
He reached over and grabbed one of about 5 paperbacks. They were all identical. Pulled it off and handed it to me. It was John Stott's Basic Christianity. He said, why don't you read that? Let's have lunch. So I read it. I still have that copy at home. He witnessed to me. I did believe after reading that book that sin existed. That was a breakthrough, but I didn't personalize it. And all of his witness, I said, man, you ought to be a pastor. I can't believe how articulate you are. Went right over my head, though. I mean, it was not a movement of the Holy Spirit, even though I think he was a Spirit-led guy. That's my... Let me just turn this off real quick.
Totally fine. No problem.
Just to check this real quick.
That's his pump.
Yeah.
Be sure and tell them about what you said to me, too.
Oh,
at the
I will.
table. It's funny.
Okay. So what happened is all of this searching. What amazes me is just how God invaded our lives.
Yeah.
He sought us out. I was, sort of seeking, but I had nothing to do with this. Mimi's conversion was overwhelming, and I just saw her come alive. I mean, she was depressed and hopeless, and she just became on fire. And I felt like I was standing I said it one night. I said, I feel like you're in love with someone else. And she said, I am.
Interesting.
And I said, I think you love him more than me. And she said, I do, but I love you more than ever. And it was apparent that she did. Everything about her was better. It was overwhelming. It just, it was an overwhelming experience to see the transformation in her life. And I realized what I'd been hungering for, she had. So I started to attend Menlo Pres somewhat reluctantly, and she didn't put any pressure on me.
Which is not
Which
like
was
me.
very atypical, very atypical.
Okay.
She's quite capable, particularly at that time in our lives, of putting pressure on me to do what she wanted me to do. But she put zero pressure, but I started attending, and then they had a seekers and joiners class at the time.
This was
so
6
this is
months.
six months later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been attending, and I noticed that she was not the only person that was filled with this life. There were other people there at church. Walt was the pastor.
Sure.
So I joined the Seekers and Joiners class, and I was scared to death to join it because I was afraid. I thought there were only going to be two options. One, I would join the church as a hypocrite, not really believing.
Mm-hmm.
Or the worst option was I would not join and be empty again. And in the Seekers and Joiners class, John Jenks was my group leader, and he was a pillar of the church. And we read The Prodigal Son, and I identified, even though I was a prodigal in spades, I identified with the older son.
Yeah. Sure.
And one of the questions was, what's wrong with the relationship with the son, the older son, and the father? And I said, well, he's arrogant, prideful. And the Holy Spirit sort of said, hey, do you know anybody like that? And so that night I got on my knees and I said, if you exist, God, and I wasn't at all sure, take away my pride.
Yeah.
And the next day I got down on my knees and received Christ.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And transformational. And I went from, total pro-abortion, no reason not to abort an unwanted child. I mean, it's just an evolutionary accident to, oh my gosh, how can you, this is a creation of God. It was just, without any rational processing, I knew that the Holy Spirit had come into me and completely changed my whole worldview.
Wow. And then how did that affect your relationship together? Because at one point,
It's transformational.
yeah.
Because I up until that time, I described it as I felt like I was standing on a train platform, and Mimi was on the train waving goodbye.
Right.
I mean, she was going down the track
Yeah, I
somewhere,
went to
and I didn't know
BSF,
where
to
it
church.
was.
And I didn't even invite him to church because I didn't want to put any pressure on him. I just said, I'm going to church. And he said,
Okay,
well,
see you
I might
later.
just come along.
Oh, yeah.
But, we're talking about our church, this wonderful church. One quickie here is the very first day I was at church, and I think you were with me. I'm not sure.
Might have been.
But anyway, Walt is, welcoming everybody, and he said, you're not here by accident, you're here by divine providence.
Yeah.
I get goosebumps right now even saying that to you. It was as if God was saying that to me through Walt.
Yeah.
And that happened many times with Walt, but that was how beautiful to feel, this new pastor, new to me, saying something like that to me. How did he know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then from there, how do you get involved? I mean, it sounds like you're at church all the time, doing Bible studies and this and that. And then Burt, now you're kind of buying in. You're like, okay, I'll lay down my pride. And so was it just I'll start attending more often, or did you jump right in to do some of the life group things or the classes things, or what was that journey like?
Yeah, I mean, we were attending every week,
Okay.
regularly, and
And we had children that needed
Yeah.
to get integrated.
Okay.
Too.
So, did you allow them to make the choice, or you just like, y'all are coming to church with
Well,
me?
One of them we didn't have any choice for.
yeah.
Okay.
That's the one that,
Okay.
that
Yeah.
brought me.
Yep, that was probably me.
He led us to Jesus.
And he did, but it was not by witnessing. But yeah, and I got Mimi was very involved with BSF,
But it was not at this church.
Okay.
It was over at another church.
and then I took the Bethel series, which was offered here at the church, and then subsequently I got involved with BSF as well, which was the men's group was meeting at Menlo, and I started attending men's Bible study on Saturday morning. Walt led that. It was a wonderful time. So, and we went to Mount Hermon together, the family
Family
camp,
camp.
every
fun.
fall.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
fall, the whole church, not the whole church, but lots of people would go
And,
to Mount
and I
Hermon.
went to the women's, thing down at Sillamar
Okay.
every year. And we basically, God gave us new friends through all of this.
Right.
We really met a lot of wonderful people.
Yeah. And then at some point, you found yourselves involved with the mission trip. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, we were interested in mission, and I expressed it to Rick Langlow, who was the mission pastor here, and he subsequently became the executive pastor before he went to Southern California. But and our first mission trip was actually to Mauritania, Africa.
Mauritania, Africa.
And,
Interesting.
and I
Okay.
didn't even, when Rick said, would you like to go to Mauritania?
Like, what is that?
We had to go look it up.
we didn't even know where the heck it was.
Okay.
And so we went with Judy and Gary Hagan. Gary was the business administrator for the church at the time,
Okay.
and they led a marriage mentoring thing for the World Vision team over there. So we went over there with them. That was our first experience. But I then came on session, and John Jinks was the chair of mission, and I was in the mission department.
Okay.
And that's when I got involved with Hope Unlimited for Children,
Oh, yes.
because that's when the church, I believe it was about 1992, made a $120,000 gift grant, and they offered it to 40 different applicants, and Hope ended up winning it. And so one of the founders, Jack Smith, the dad, and his son Philip founded it. And Jack came to the church to thank us for this incredible gift that literally launched the ministry in Brazil. And Rick asked us to have Jack over for dinner following that service. And so we had Jack for dinner, and Jack invited me and our prodigal son to go to Brazil.
He had,
And-
long hair down to here. His boxers were hanging down below. He wasn't even eating dinner with us. He's just cruising. through the
Earrings in
room.
his ears. And Jack's got kind of gray hair around here, bald, paunchy, old guy. And he sees Scott walk through the room, and he hops up off from the table and says, "You must be Scott. I want you to come to Brazil this summer with your dad." And he hadn't even mentioned anything to me. That was classic Jack. And so
Scott wasn't having anything
Scott
to do with
just sort
church.
of looked at him like, who is this
is
person?
this? Yeah.
And anyway, so I told Jack, I said, I'd love to come to Brazil, but there's no way Scott's going to come because he hasn't even attended. He's not attending church. Jack said, I think he's going to come. I'm praying that he will come. So I just gave him Scott. I said, hey, we need to make vacation plans for the summer. So if we're going to go to Brazil, let me know. If we're not, let me know, and then we'll make some other plans to do something. And he came in about a week later and said, let's go to Brazil.
Wow.
That was in 1993,
Okay.
and we went down on a father-son work trip.
Yeah.
it was transformational for him and for me. And then we led a work trip from Menlo in 1994, the next year.
And by this time, Scott had,
And
he had become a Christian.
Really?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Do you think it was because of that first trip down? Did that play a big part in it? Or?
It's his spiritual journey is I don't know exactly. He's been saved from eternity, but there's more to the story. But I don't know. I do remember vividly one of the kids asking him. I think it was in '93, but it might have been in '94. One of the street kids.
One of the Brazilian kids
asked him, how can you be a Christian with long hair and earrings? And he said, it's not what's on the outside, it's what's in your heart.
Wow.
That was
It
his
is
response.
An answer.
Yeah.
Proud mom and dad moment right there.
Proud mom and dad moment. Euphoric would be the better term,
Oh,
probably.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he came, he showed up when our daughter on Senior Sunday gave a sermon. And I was just thinking of the verse, and now to him who does beyond anything we could ask for or imagine. And that's how I felt when Scott showed up and went to see his sister.
Yeah.
So his spiritual journey, his journey period, has been an interesting one.
Okay.
But he's a great guy.
Sure. It sounds like the relationship with Hope Unlimited continued after those first couple of years. Is that right?
Very much so. I'm still pray for Hope, or we contribute to it. I was on the board for many, many years. And it has, I can't thank Menlo enough for introducing me to Hope, because I feel like through the ministry of Menlo and through BSF, I have learned about God and learned good doctrine. But at Hope, I have seen God work miracles.
Wow.
I've seen him, and at times I've been discouraged about my own spiritual journey and the slow, agonizing process of sanctification. And when I have watched what God has done with these street kids and the transformation that's occurred, it has strengthened my faith in that. And in his power to do miraculous work.
Yes.
So it has been a huge blessing, one of the biggest blessings in my life.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit earlier, but when I was on staff with Cafe and Sanctuary down the street in Menlo Park, I was able to lead a team that went down to Hope Unlimited in 2016 or 2017.
Yeah.
2017? Yeah. And it was, I still remember it vividly. It was amazing. Just the...
It's exciting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It was great.
Yeah.
I was able to go with my wife, and we took about 18 or so other young adults from our church. Scott Palmbush went with us, and he didn't chaperone his daughter Kira, but she was on the trip as well. She was a little bit younger, so they came, and then we partnered with some folks from King's Academy with Laura
Sure.
Becker-Lukey and some of her
yeah.
friends. Yep. And so we were one of the first groups to do like a summer camp for the kids.
Oh, were you
So
really?
we were able to like rent a facility and basically give the kids there a vacation for a week. The most exhausting week of my life.
Yes,
But-
I bet.
So transformational and so like it was just like you said, like you can see actively the work that God is doing in people's lives. And it's
Yeah.
just
Yes.
unlike anything else.
Yeah.
And Josh just got back from
Yeah.
taking the high schoolers down there to do the same thing. And I can tell you that, and that was the first trip for Americans since COVID.
Oh yeah.
And the kids in Brazil were saying, when are the Americans coming back? When are they coming back? And when, they were euphoric
Sure.
to have the Americans come back, but also euphoric to have the camp, because the camp is a highlight for their year, really, I think. And so Menlo's involvement in making those camps happen is just a huge gift to Hope and to the kids.
Yeah. it's a gift to us, to be honest. Like the
yeah.
people that get to go on the trip as well. Like it's just such a
Yeah.
privilege, and we were lucky too to have a couple of we had Brazilian au pairs that were attending Sanctuary. And
Oh.
young adults, and so they helped lead the trip too, and they would translate
that's
for us.
awesome.
There was
Oh,
about
my
4 or
gosh,
5
yeah.
of them that came, and it's just amazing how God just kind of has that in the works, and how it just. But it was, yeah.
God
wow.
loves that ministry.
He really does.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's amazing that it started pretty much with that first inaugural trip, and now we're still doing things like that today. And like you said,
Absolutely.
Joshua Horton just got back from that trip, and they had an amazing time as well, which was amazing. Yes.
Well, Menlo's been one of the probably the most important supporter, church supporter of hope
Yeah.
over the years. Without Menlo, it might not have existed. I mean, it's God's ministry. He could have made it happen a different way, but the neat thing is that Menlo has been part of it and has been blessed. Menlo's been blessed by Hope, and Hope's been seriously blessed by Menlo.
Definitely. And so as this is happening, you two are both getting more involved. What was that like with your marriage? Did you see your marriage changing at all with how you felt like you're being left behind, and now you're on the train too? And so that again, kind of, to use your language earlier, the equally yoked part of that must have been really refreshing.
Well, it was. I've not been as involved in mission
Okay.
as Burt has.
Sure. But
I've gone on a couple of trips and things like that. That's my heartbeat, and my ministry has been more mentoring or teaching. So, Burt and I'm fairly comfortable being independent. He was very busy as a doctor and an internist, and got home, late at night, and so I knew how to make life happen pretty well. But when when he was free, I loved it. But we have now that he's retired, and I am not actively teaching at this time. We're just having a fun season of our life. We laugh a lot.
Yeah.
We go to the doctors and find out something else is wrong, and then we cry a little bit, and then we laugh
have,
a little more.
As our friend Alan Phipps says, we have organ recitals.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
Oh,
Yeah.
my stomach. Oh, my neck. Yeah. So, but our friendship and our fun, we have a lot of fun together
Sounds
now.
like it.
And yet, our quiet time is very important. We both go off to our corners in the house, and we'll share our BSF lessons with each other. But spiritually, we're in a very, very peaceful place, and we do the marriage.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit.
The marriage mentoring.
Okay.
And
That
Burt-
was actually my first introduction to Burt, was working with Sanctuary Young Adults. I would have a lot of people that were interested in premarital counseling. My wife Missy and I did that as well with Bruce and Vicki Johnson.
I saw that. That was neat.
And that was through your connection. And so
Yeah.
how did that start? Was there a marriage?
It was around before us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
I
at
think
what point did you get
Christine
involved?
Taylor, who was an elder here at one point, she and her husband and maybe a couple of other people had a program. Then they changed from that program to Prepare Enrich. And another couple led it for a while, and then they needed someone to take over. And Burt felt very called to take that over.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he did some wonderful. We trained couples, like the couple that probably mentored you. They got a training and stuff.
Yeah.
And we've seen miracles in our, mentoring other people.
Sure.
That's another blessing ministry.
It really is.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard.
Of course.
Sometimes it's hard, but it really, when you see them pick up on those skills, communication skills, and things like that, that they're going to carry with them through their marriage.
Sure.
They're excited.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't learn it in their home or from their home. A lot of us, you know, come into adulthood needing to learn new skills.
Of course, yeah. And so, Bert, what drove you to say yes to that ask of, will you help do this?
It was really interesting because I was not looking for anything else to do.
Yeah, it sounded like you were kind of busy at that time.
Yeah, but we had really fallen in love with mentoring, and so this other couple was retiring from the leadership role, and I just thought, this ministry is just, I don't want it to die. So one Saturday, I just got on the computer and I started looking up data on what difference does it make to get premarital mentoring.
Sure.
And I discovered 30% reduction in divorce rates, a significant increase in an enriched relationship if you have premarital mentoring. And then I looked up a bunch of stuff on Focus on the Family on the devastation of divorce. And I thought, you know, this is a ministry that actually has proven data. As a doc, there's a thing called evidence-based medicine. And what I've learned with evidence-based medicine is that a lot of the stuff I learned in medical school and was drilled into my head actually is not helpful. And in fact, and sometimes it's actually counterproductive.
Oh, interesting.
And so, and some of the things that, some of the programs and stuff, do we have any proof they work? This is a proven, effective ministry. So I got very passionate about it. And I know this works. This can stop divorce. And now my major desire, I consider premarital mentoring like a minesweeper. You're looking for something that's going to blow up a relationship, and you may be able to diffuse the mine and have it not blow up, or you're going to say, hey, this relationship, the people will discover that the relationship is not meant to be for a lifetime. So preventing divorce was my primary motivation that drove me. But obviously enhancing the relationship was also a huge benefit. So at the end of that day, I'd spent the whole day just studying this stuff, and by the end of that, I just felt called. And then I thought, well, I'm not going to do this unless the rest of the leadership team says, you know, we want you to lead. And also, at that time, Charlie Scanlon was the lead pastor for Menlo at the campus. And I knew Charlie well. He had been the high school minister for our daughter. And so I went in and talked to Charlie and I said, do you support this ministry? And he said, absolutely, positively support it 100%. And so when he said that, Mimi said, thumbs up. I said, okay, I'll lead. So I did for, I think it was about 7 or 8 years, something like that.
Okay. Do you have stats on how many people have gone through marriage mentoring?
I have them. I don't have them in my head, but at one point we had 40 trained couples. 40.
Wow, those are the leaders that are meeting with.
Well, those are the mentors.
Yeah, those are the mentors.
And we couldn't keep up with the demand.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is that the demand has just shriveled up. Now, part of that was COVID.
Sure.
But I think part of it is nobody wants to get married anymore. Because, and I've talked to Adam about this. They're hopeless about marriage. You know, everybody, they look at the statistics, and so I'm hoping to have a chance to talk with Phil about. We're working on an appointment and hoping to maybe encourage people to not just give up on marriage.
Definitely. Well, as someone that went through the class, I can't recommend it enough. Those meetings were super helpful.
I was hoping you'd share what
and
you thought of it.
I like the kind of the framework of the potential bombs going off, because whether or not we realize it in our relationship, we thought we were both fairly healthy people that saw the world the same way. That's why we're getting married. And then when we dive into conversations around finance or how to have a hard discussion or these things, like, I approached it my way. Missy approached it her way.
Yeah.
And we were, in fact, in line for most of it, but some parts we were not. And so if we wouldn't have had those conversations before, or be given the tools and the framework to work through them, not only in that moment, but as they actively come up or as they happen, it would have been really tough.
Yeah.
And practice really does make a difference. I mean,
really
active
does.
listening
Yeah.
and good communication.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's stuff that also needs to be revisited, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because I'm very, very quick to forget a lot of the
yeah.
things that we talked about. And so every once in a while, we'll go back through and we'll look through our booklets, or we'll do an exercise that we remember that we did.
Yeah.
Oh, good
Great.
for you guys.
Yeah.
Yay.
It's fun, kind of. I mean, we know that it's like working out. We know that it's good for us. We're going to be a little bit sore after we do it. It's going to
Yeah.
hurt a little bit, but in the long run, it's going
Yeah.
to make us much stronger.
Yeah.
So-
Amen. And it just can it can prevent a lot of bad habits from getting ingrained.
Yeah.
And a bad dynamic. And if you let that bad dynamic dive far enough, you get irreparable damage
Right.
to a relationship, and this prevents that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So I'm so glad to hear you had such
Yeah.
a positive experience with it.
Yeah, it was great. And so, what else? What else would you like to share about Menlo, or what else? What other stories maybe you'd like to share about as kind of in
Well,
a
if-
reflective mindset?
There's one thing I'd love
Sure.
to just say, and that is you were asking, looking ahead 150 years,
Yeah.
what do you hope Menlo Church will be doing?
Mm-hmm.
And when we found out that we had Phil as our new pastor,
Mm-hmm.
I felt very strongly in my spirit that God was saying, behold, I am doing a new thing at Menlo Church. And I am going to make Menlo into the beautiful bride for the bridegroom in Revelation.
Yeah.
And that just my whole insides just feel so excited. And I shared that with another pastor, and he felt the same way.
Oh, good.
They, very much the same words that I was using. And let us rejoice and behold and give him glory, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. So that's what we're about here, is hour by hour, day by day, making ourselves more and more ready to be a beautiful bride for our bridegroom.
That's so good. Yeah. Bert, anything to add?
I'd love to just add that, I first met John Jenks in that Seekers and Joiners class, and then we ended up being elders together in the mission department, and we became lifelong friends. He became a mentor for me when I was on the board at Hope. He mentored me. We met regularly for breakfast, and he was a real blessing in my life, and I really am grateful for that. The only other thing I wanted to say is that we are, I think I can speak for you on this, very optimistic about where Menlo is right now.
Yeah.
We prayed a lot about a new pastor, and I love Phil's humility. I love his
Amen.
focus on the core of the gospel, and the transformation that needs to happen within each of us for us to reach others. And I think the church, it may be healthier now than I have seen it in a long time.
Yeah.
And I love the direction it's moving in, and I'm really optimistic about the future. I don't have a clue what 150 years from now is going to look like, though.
I don't know if anyone does.
Even 10 years is enough.
Yeah.
So anyway,
That's so good. Well, thank you so much for being on. This was such a fun
Yes.
conversation, and
Oh, good.
I'm very happy to have had it, and just am going to have to listen back and reflect about some of, I don't know if you probably know, but there is a lot of wisdom in how you are responding to things that you're sharing, the way that you're answering questions. And so I find that very encouraging. And I find your optimism for where we're headed also really encouraging because you have seen a lot since you've been here, and you've experienced a lot since you've been here. And so taking that into consideration with thinking about where this church is headed, saying we're in a good spot, saying that we're headed into a bright future, it leaves me very encouraged.
Absolutely.
Oh, good. Mark, it's a joy to work with you.
Yes.
You have a gift. You really have a wonderful gift. And you can make sure this part is on.
I was going to cut it out.
Yeah. But you really do. Your warmth is just.
You're fun.
You exude warmth.
You make us feel.
You could not make us more relaxed and at ease. It's been fun to talk to you. I mean, it's just been awesome.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everything you're doing.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.